Welcome back to my channel. Today I will be talking to you about all of the books I read in the month of August. So the first book which I finished was Work by Louisa May Alcott. I started this in the month of July at the very end. This book turned out to be very, very interesting. It was almost like reading a Bronte novel but set in the United States. This book was published 8 years after the end of the Civil War, and it follows this young woman who really is looking for that sort of transcendental self-reliance lifestyle. But, you know, she's a woman, so her job opportunities are limited, but she's still trying to achieve that sort of independence or standing on her own 2 feet. The novel starts off with her living with her aunt and uncle and telling them that she wants her life to be filled with passion. And she looks into the fireplace and says, you know, see those 2 logs? Yes, they'll both end up ashes in the morning, but one of them is blazing and is singing and sparkling, and the other one is just withering away in the corner. And I want to be like the one that's sparkling, and I want to go out with a spark and a flame. And it explores a lot of themes. It's mostly focused on, you know, early themes of feminism and the limited opportunities for women. She kind of becomes, you know, a companion, a governess, a seamstress. But it also looks at sort of how much a war can shake up a nation and kind of the side effects of that. It's very easy to get through. It's enjoyable. I found the language to be like very accessible. It's not exclusive in any way. So if you're looking for like a 19th century read, this is a good one. Then I buddy read a book with Barb, whose Instagram I'll link down below. So I first heard of this book on Natalie's channel from Curious Reader. And this is written by Rainer Wynn. It's called The Salt Path. I am going to link down below Natalie's full review of this book because it really persuaded me to pick this up. So this follows an older couple, and they've been through a lot. The author herself is very, you know, strong and resilient, and I think she's in her late 50s, and her husband Moth had just been diagnosed with a terminal illness. And just in the middle of all this and all of these bills, they kind of find themselves in the middle of a lawsuit where someone claims that the property that they've lived on their entire lives is actually that other person's. So after a while, they're sort of drained and they're exhausted and sick, and they lose their home. And at this point, the 2 of them decide to go on a journey and take a 600-mile walk around the UK, and they kind of backpack. And I thought it was so interesting to see an older couple do this. I feel like in a lot of these books you sort of see young people like in their 20s just being like, I need to discover myself and go on this walk. But these are 2 people who have been together for a lifetime, who have been brought to like the brink of disaster and destruction with like terminal illness, and their savings are gone, and yet they find this strength to go through all of this, and they kind of pick up this energy from nature, and the descriptions of the nature scenes are just phenomenal. I really enjoy this book. It's a great memoir and nature writing book. So if you're looking for that hybrid, this is a great one. If you really enjoyed things like Cheryl Strayed's Wild, you might really love this one. And I thought her writing was just beautiful and very accessible, and she moves through things really fast. Like, she doesn't dwell on anything for too long, so that was also kind of fun and fast-paced. Then I was still kind of in my Stranger Things mode, and I picked up this Canadian book by Craig Davidson. It's called The Saturday Night Ghost Club. Even the script sort of looks like the Stranger Things script. So this is set in the 1980s, and it follows a young boy by the name of Jake who lives with his really eccentric uncle, whose name is Calvin, and his uncle kind of collects weird things, and they live very close to Niagara Falls. And this book sort of follows the little boy and his group of friends who kind of form this Saturday Night Ghost Club, and it's kind of creepy, very Stephen King, Stranger Things. This was published in 2018, so I thought that maybe it's kind of springing off of the whole Stranger Things phenomenon. So It feels very similar to that, but it has some twists of its own and a voice of its own, and I really appreciated the Canadianness of it. So if you're looking for a really cool October read, this would be a really good one. And it's not horror, so it's not like super frightening. It's just the right amount of thriller. Then I did not read anything for about a week. I was in Dublin, and I'll link down the video about that. It was at Worldcon, and I got really excited about science fiction while I was there. And I packed with me this one book that I've been meaning to read for a while. It's called The Hollow Man by Dan Simmons. Now, this was kind of on the same lists with Solaris because it supposedly belongs to this sub-genre of science fiction where it's about mind reading or telepathy. So this book starts off with this couple, Jeremy and Gail, and in the very first page, Gail dies. And that's kind of the traumatic moment that's like in the middle of things. And then we have alternating chapters. So one chapter will be on the past, and we get to meet Gail and how they met and they connected, and Jeremy can read her mind, and they have this great telepathic relationship. And in this process of trying to get to know each other and themselves, you learn a lot about this telepathic superpower or ability. And then the alternating chapters kind of take place after Gail's death, and you get to watch Jeremy kind of deteriorate. In many ways, I found that the language in the after Gail's death to be much swearing, and it felt like you're going from a science lab and you suddenly like find yourself in a trailer park. And I didn't like that on a language basis. I found it to be, not very instructive. However, I thought that he did a great job kind of highlighting grief within the sci-fi genre. You kind of get to see Jeremy like hang out with people who have nothing to do with him or with his lifestyle, and at some points you wonder what he's doing, and then after the halfway point it just really takes off in a totally different direction. It also kind of reminded me of that style of storytelling similar to Lost, where you have this like one traumatic event like crashing on an island, and then you have character development by showing the past and the present. And it worked really well for this, especially in showing how different he is now than when Gail was around. Then I watched Endgame a few times, and I got really excited whenever Loki would show up on the screen, because I don't know, I just find him awesome. I thought, why don't I pick up Neil Gaiman's Norse Mythology? I didn't know what to expect, and I have personally not read all the sagas. This book starts off with a dedication, and I think the dedication sets up this book very well. It says, "For Everett, old stories for a new boy." And that's exactly what this book is. Basically, Neil Gaiman says he loves Norse myths, which is obvious if you look at some of his backlist. But he wanted to tell us stories from the Edda, from the Prose Edda, Poetic Edda, and some of the sagas, but without, the sort of old element, to kind of feel like you're sitting around the campfire with a friend or a storyteller of sorts, and he's just kind of casually telling you these stories. You now, you in the 21st century. I love Neil Gaiman's storytelling style so much, and you can tell he's done his research. No, he doesn't add to it, he doesn't extract from it. He just retells it in a very old school retelling sort of way, where he simplifies it and makes it sort of accessible. But I just flew right through this. It was very enjoyable, and it made me laugh many times, mainly because I keep picturing Chris Hemsworth as Thor and Tom Hiddleston as Loki. And there were some scenes where Thor dresses up in a bride's dress to go get his hammer back by tricking a giant that he himself is Freya. And in my head, Chris Hemsworth is just so awkward that all of these scenes just came across as way funnier. There were a few stories following Odin, and it was really cool to see kind of the origins of some of Odin. I, again, have not read any of the sagas. However, there are many booktubers who have done a saga-along, so if you are interested in that, I'll link a few down below because they're extraordinary reviews. If you're looking for like an introduction to Norse myths, this is a great one. The last book I read was a play, so this is called The Physicists by Friedrich Dürrenmatt. This I picked up because both my parents are physicists, so I thought, why not? But I did not expect what followed. So Dürrenmatt is like, if Samuel Beckett and Oscar Wilde had a child, and that child grew up to be a troll, that would be Dürrenmatt. So I don't even know where to begin. So this play is set in a sanatorium, in an asylum, in the mountains, very isolated in this town that's kind of a ruin now, but it used to be owned by richer people. And you have this inspector walking in because someone has been murdered. And this is not the first time nor the last, but one of the patients had turned out to be quite violent towards one of the nurses. And you kind of start to get to know the patients because the inspector asks a lot of questions and the nurse kind of protects the patient, saying no, they're sick, they don't know what they're doing. Now the patients are all physicists, and one of them thinks he's Albert Einstein, another one thinks he's Isaac Newton, but then secretly tells us that he's actually just faking that he's Isaac Newton because he really knows that he's Albert Einstein. But the other guy is so crazy that he wants to protect him, so he's not going to admit that he's really Albert Einstein. So it's a lot of those. This is just dark satire and dark humor. There's a lot that kind of happens afterwards. There's even a romance and a third person who really believes that he is speaking to King Solomon. There are moments where you find that when it's about science, it's crazy, but if it's King Solomon, it's religion and it's a miracle. And there's an element of belief almost, as if it's not completely ridiculous. And I think seeing this on stage would be phenomenal. It would be something like watching The Importance of Being Earnest, where when you read it on the page, it's kind of like, huh, but when you watch it live, it's like, oh my god, that's hilarious. So again, this is kind of dark humor. Don't expect like proper representation or anything like that. The last thing that I did not get a chance to finish is The October Country by Ray Bradbury. This is a short story collection. I told you about the first few stories I read in my last wrap-up, and since then I've only read one more story called The Jar, which was about this mysterious jar showing up and everyone seeing different things in this jar. It was kind of like a choose-your-own-adventure jar, and it was just kind of interestingly told. And I have not read anything else because I just put this down and I got distracted. So I'm going to carry on with this for sure. I really love Ray Bradbury. So this is not like a DNF or anything like that. I just did not pick it up for reasons. So that's it. Those are all the books I read this month. Please let me know if you have read any of these, if you would like to read any of them, and what you read this month, because I would really like to look for more recommendations. And I hope to see you soon in my next video. Bye!